Hey everybody, it's LavenderTowne, and today I'm continuing my series where I turn random stuff into cute character designs. We're revisiting aesthetics because there's so many exciting ones. The one we're starting with today is solarpunk, and as I explain this aesthetic and this type of speculative fiction more, you'll understand why we absolutely had to start with a clip of me drawing in person in real life surrounded by plants. I just felt like it would be much more appropriate for this particular aesthetic. Now, solarpunk, like I said, is a type of speculative fiction. A lot of speculative fiction, especially about the future, tends to be really nihilistic or pessimistic, like cyberpunk, which we're also going to talk about in this video. But solarpunk is very different. Solarpunk is almost utopian. It's a rejection of pessimism about the future, not pretending that the problems that we have aren't real or are going to go away on their own, but it's an imagining of a future where problems like climate change, overpopulation, pollution are figured out with technology that locks in and essentially uses human ingenuity to create a world where humans and nature and animals can all kind of coexist in a way that's symbiotic, where there's kind of benefit to everyone. There's a big emphasis on things like clean power, like solar energy and wind power, and you'll see these amazing sort of like utopian illustrations of villages or cities that are full of greenery that give people shade and oxygen, even though it's in the future. So there's also futuristic things like you'd see in a cyberpunk world. One of the things I think that are interesting about this is that I do feel like it's much easier to imagine a world that is falling apart worse than the world we live in, whereas trying to figure out how people would solve big problems and really digging into that feels a little bit more imaginative and like hard work, but in a way that I think could be really rewarding. I've always wanted to write a story in a solarpunk world because of this. Anyway, it's one of my favorites. So one of the things I really wanted to keep center on this character is like the core ideals of this this aesthetic or type of thought. So I wanted to give her like these dragonfly angel wings, but they're actually like solar panels, and then she also has slung over her shoulder this little like pod of water, and you can see that she can take a little sprayer off the side, and there's like a crank on it, so I guess she can power it with her own motion. I really tried to focus on this idea of like natural technology. That's really the juxtaposition that's at the center or the heart of solarpunk, and one of the things that I think make it so visually interesting. To me, solarpunk is the cheerful younger sister to cyberpunk, and I can imagine her living out her life trying to come up with cool new inventions that make the world better, and generally just being very, very passionate about the environment. That is at such a core of this whole idea. I really love utopian ideas, especially when they're based in some kind of science, because I do think that without the ability to imagine a better future, it's really hard to actually make one. Anyway, that's one of the reasons I'm so fond of this aesthetic. Now let's talk about cryptidcore. Cryptidcore is an aesthetic that combines the word cryptid, referring to an animal that is thought to be mythological, with the word core, signifying that it's the aesthetic to do with it. Wait. Did you hear that? Is someone out there? Hello? Hello? Anyway, so this is the cryptidcore character. I really love this aesthetic. I think that it is so fun, so like spooky Halloween and very Pacific Northwest, which I have a very big soft spot for aesthetics that tap into that, TV shows that tap into that. I would say that the pieces of media that remind me most of this kind of aesthetic outside of like actual Sasquatch hunting shows or ghost adventures would be something like X-Files, Twin Peaks, even Life is Strange. Just this sense that in your small, maybe coastal, foresty town, that something is not right. Something's being hidden from you. I just think that that really works for me, probably partially due to where I grew up, but also just because I think it's just cool. I think all of us want to believe in things that are a little bit more magical, things that are unseen, unseen mysteries. I think that's in human nature, and there have been, you know, folklore about mystical creatures in like every society in every time in history. So I think it's incredibly human to be interested in these things. One thing I really wanted to do with this character was give her a pair of glasses that reference the way that people will circle like a smudge or a dot in a photograph. They'll circle it in red and like point to it with a white arrow. So I wanted to make her wear like circle glasses with that white arrow. It was really hard not to make it too cluttered, and I did like having her sort of like sleep deprived, paranoid eyes being a center of the image, so I didn't want to cover that up too much. I kept toggling her glasses on and off, trying to figure out how to make it work. I also gave her like a full leg sleeve, a pant leg? What would you call a leg sleeve? I don't actually know. With of course a cute little Bigfoot and some Fresno night crawlers scampering along, and then she's got a little Illuminati symbol on her arm as well. The outfit is basically just like an actual outfit that I would love to wear, maybe sans the micro shorts. I'm more of a skirt girl, but anyhow, I can't get over how much I like this aesthetic. Another big part of it to me is like big chunky tech props, so things like a big heavy flashlight and a big giant oversized huge walkie-talkie. I realized I just described it as big like 7 times, but anyway. I gave her some corduroy texture on her pants, and then she was all dialed. She definitely looks like she hears something out in the woods. Next up is webcore. Now, webcore is a really interesting aesthetic for someone like me who grew up on the cusp of millennial and Gen Z. I feel like those of us who remember having a computer room rather than, you know, having a computer in their phone, basically in their pocket, or a laptop, this aesthetic really speaks to that time period where the internet was really mysterious and really interesting, and there was a lot of variety. It's not like everyone was just on the same 3 websites or apps every single day. So I feel like webcore is really about that, the aesthetic of that time when the internet was still kind of like a nerd hobbyist kind of thing, and a lot of regular people did not even see the value in it. And one of the things that really reminds me of this time period is ASCII art. So one of the things that was so cool about ASCII art, which is basically just images made out of punctuation, was that it was a way to post images where you normally couldn't post them. So if you were on a forum where images were not allowed, or if you had such bad dial-up that like posting a photo or even downloading a photo took forever, ASCII was a way to basically show a picture while still just sticking to the regular text that was allowed or sort of easily accessible. So I knew right away I wanted to give her kind of an ASCII face. I am not actually good at doing this. I never learned how to do it. It's not one of the things that I picked up in this time. I remember thinking it was basically like magic, but what I ended up doing was kind of a cheat. I used simple punctuation to sort of make over her face, but I wouldn't have been able to move the text boxes around the way that I did in this one, so I don't think this really counts. I also wanted to give her face kind of that like blue screen of death kind of a look. I was torn between making it look like a Mac terminal, like the screen of like a DOS computer, and this blue screen, but since I was most familiar with seeing the blue screen, I decided to go that direction for her, and I think she actually looks so very cute. The waistband of her underwear looks like MS Paint's little color palette. That's what I was trying to go for anyway. I imagine her being quite the little nerd, very clever, but maybe not the most socially aware character, and honestly I like her design so much I might draw her again. Apparently this put me on a nostalgia trip because this is another aesthetic from the early 2000s or the very late 1990s, and that is whimsigoth or whimsical goth. It is actually more of an interior design aesthetic, but it is kind of associated with certain types of clothing as well as a certain type of lifestyle or type of person, like a lot of aesthetics are. I think this is a very underrated aesthetic. It's basically kind of like a witchy aesthetic. It's a little new agey, and it's very, very cute. Like, it's a cute kind of spooky. I would say most like quirky or kid kind of Halloween aesthetics can kind of dovetail well with this. Things like Edward Scissorhands, the series of unfortunate events, these are very whimsigoth. It's almost like seeing the humor in things going terribly wrong, and also visual things like stars and moons and crystals and tarot. These are kind of the reasons why it's associated with like a witchy aesthetic, because it's often paired with these kinds of things. For my little character, I decided to bring her into a more cartoony style. I brought back the noodle arms. Did you guys miss them? And then I also have a lot of like spirals. That's something I see all the time when I look up whimsigoth. And I basically just gave her Coraline's sweater because this sweater with the gold stars is so it's so iconic of the style to me. I also gave her a big book and a big droopy witch's hat, and then a lot of black and white. I think Beetlejuice also is very whimsigoth. You know, dark comedy fits well into this, and especially anything that came out in that genre around the time of the late 90s and early 2000s. I gave her a little fairy wing with like an autumn leaf design, and I think that that also fits really well. This is a very autumnal kind of aesthetic. I want to give a quick thank you to Milanote for helping me keep my references together and for sponsoring this video. It's kind of like a digital version of a corkboard, which I need badly because I tend to lose my references in articles when I don't have them visually together in one place. This is the one I used for the cryptidcore character, and wait, who left these strange comments? I don't remember writing these. What's going on? Sorry guys, I just totally zoned out there for a minute. Anyway, this is the process of how I built the board for cryptidcore. I like to start with a bunch of pictures that remind me of the aesthetic and then build it out with other stuff. I will warn you, if you start using Milanote, it's gonna make your research process a little bit addictive. Honestly, I could have kept working on this cryptidcore board forever, partially because I just am kind of obsessed with this aesthetic. I love mysterious things like Twin Peaks and the X-Files and Night Vale and, you know, Invader Zim and Alan Wake. These are things that I really love. I used to be obsessed with cryptozoology when I was a kid, and of course my favorite lemon demon is very much this aesthetic. You can see I just dropped in a Spotify link. You can also use SoundCloud, and then you can play the music actually inside of your board and place it around your board in various spots. So I put in Ancient Aliens by Lemon Demon as well. And then I also put in this subboard to just keep all of my information about various different cryptids. Obviously I couldn't put them all in, but I put in the classics like Mothman and Bigfoot and the Fresno Nightcrawler, Chupacabra. The boards within a board kind of thing can make this really go crazy. Like, you can have so much information all sort of like neatly tucked in its appropriate place, which makes it so much easier to find stuff later. I'm definitely one of those people who tends to like dump lots and lots of references into my downloads folder with no labeling, and then I just never see them again. So this has been a way for me to actually use the stuff that I find and research for myself, because otherwise it's kind of a waste of time because I can't find them ever again. I also, just for fun, added in a little to-do list of like a perfect day for like a cryptid hunter, or a day that sort of embodies this cryptidcore kind of aesthetic energy. I think these to-do lists are probably actually designed for you to like help stay on task for projects and stuff, but I think planning the perfect cryptid hunter day is also a perfectly valid way of using it. In real life, of course, I use these, you know, to like help me hit deadlines and stuff, but I was so obsessed with this cryptidcore aesthetic that I couldn't help but add in all this extra stuff. You can put videos from YouTube into your boards as well, and they'll actually play inside of your board. So for example, I pasted a Magdalena Bay music video into my webcore board because her music videos are just so webcore to me. Her music even reminds me of PC music, which is like the most webcore thing ever. I also put in Pink and Blue by Hannah Diamond, who's also PC music. I feel like the boards keep me organized, but it's also just a way for me to really immerse myself in my projects and what I'm working on. Like when I'm working on my comic, being able to look at my character designs and the pages I've done so far really helps me stay focused. So now we gotta make the cyberpunk board. I'm using the mood board template, and it makes it really easy just to drag and drop everything into those little slots. I'm adding in some pictures and GIFs of the most iconic cyberpunk games and movies, as well as including some interesting paragraphs about the core ideas the aesthetic commonly features. The aesthetics fandom wiki was actually really helpful for this entire video, and it's really fun to just tab through there. So I would describe cyberpunk as kind of the more mainstream dystopian sibling of solarpunk, which we talked about earlier, where solarpunk sees us building technology that allows us to harness the power of nature and thrive symbiotically alongside it. Cyberpunk imagines nature more or less being obliterated by our thirst for tech advancement, causing endless urban sprawl, extreme poverty, and even losing our humanity after too many robotic implants in the body. So it's a very literal expression of the fears we have about ruthless tech advancement and what it can cost. I like to have some color samples in most of my boards, since color can be really important to an aesthetic. In Cyberpunk 2077, for example, the acid yellow they used is so iconic, I wanted to make sure it was actually tagged in the aesthetic. Milanote is free to use and it's browser-based, so you don't have to download anything. I highly recommend trying it out. I find it super helpful in getting my thoughts together, especially on big projects like comics, novels, and animation. There's a link in the description if you want to test it out yourself. Thank you again to Milanote for supporting the channel, and now that we have our board done for Cyberpunk, it's time to start drawing them. So in drawing cyberpunk, I really want to nail home the nihilism and the sort of more depressing vision of the future that comes along with all of the cool technology, because this is such a critical part of what makes cyberpunk unique. Now, believe it or not, I'm also a huge fan of cyberpunk, even though it juxtaposes so heavily with solarpunk, which I also really love. I think cyberpunk is a really fun space to play in when you're writing fiction. Again, kind of because of the same reason that any sort of speculative fiction is interesting, but like trying to imagine how technology, if, you know, advanced with no concern for ethical boundaries or like what it would do to human society, trying to figure out how that would change people and change the world is kind of interesting to think about, even if it's a little bit scary. Cyberpunk stories often feature the consistent theme of humans and human things being exploited for money. Cyberpunk stories are often pretty anti-capitalist, even if they don't intend to be, just because the world that they paint is usually made so much worse by corporations. In fact, usually the villains of these stories are some kind of mega corporation. In Cyberpunk 2077, it's Arasaka. In Snow Crash, almost all of the conflict happens because they're in an anarcho-capitalist world, and the closest thing it has to a villain would be Rife, who is basically a corporate executive. Transhumanism and the idea of modifying the body and filling it up with technology is also a big part of what makes cyberpunk unique. This can be anything from like advanced plastic surgery to things like that would give you essentially superpowers, like make your eyes able to see better or be able to record video with your pupils. I recently made a cyberpunk anti-AI art poster, and the proceeds are going to stop killer robots through the end of September. Even in the coloring, I tried to really match the way that cyberpunk kind of thinks about things, so I made sure that his skin looks kind of a little dull and desaturated, whereas his clothes and all of his tech advancements are really bright like neon. This character would definitely be in like $1 gazillion of debt to some kind of evil corporation. He would also be a part-time hacker, and definitely someone who's always out to get another body mod. Let me know what your favorite aesthetic is if you made it all the way to the end of this video, and thank you so much for doing so. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much to my patrons and members, including Palestar, Darkholder, Frogscourge, Zucchini, Zio Rays, The Main PC, Esther Kaufman, Sopapia, Roger Baker, Pretty Little Head Poppy Seed, Hey Chol, Neko Omori, Trexa Panda, Lucian, Lonely Zealot, Novel Goblin, The Mousy Mouse, Jessica Cook, Prince Piplup III, I'm a Potato, Honey Kitten, Loro, Data, Lily McFarlane, Skitten, Gold Pikachu. The Names Are Gone, Crodotus, Rectangle, Blanket of Misery, Moves Like Platinum, Sunday Good Enough, Ace Water, Jordan, Clown of Clubs, Jeffu, Sunshine, River the Goblin, Raz Tarosh, Casey, Graveyard Moss, Grexius, Emma Lightning, The Midwestern Menace, CB, Lucy Yamajiki, Ravenscrow, Zocelot, Jabber Dabber Doo, Light Julie, Kadaria, The Expressive Poker Face, Tsubaki, Cutie Pie, Ice Cream Pal, Cola, JJ Jade, and of course, blah 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 blah.